Welcome, welcome. We are so excited. Oh, thank you. Thank you to everyone for taking time out of your hot summer days to come to TPPF to hear more about parent empowerment. Before we officially get started, I want to introduce our Vice President of Policy, Derek Cohen. He's going to share a quick message, and then we'll get started with the Rockstar lineup and take your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. I think we can all start off with maybe cell phones on mute. All right, just really glad everyone's able to attend here. I just want to point out a couple of things. Everyone, please feel free to keep enjoying your lunch. Obviously, we can consider this a working lunch as we work through this conversation and just have some really good speakers waiting for you. Just so everyone knows, for those who have not been guests here before, if you need help finding the restroom, just out that door right back there to my left, y'all's right. Right through that door, there's going to be both men's and women's restrooms. Three, I want to add that, again, we are a 501c3 organization. That means we are nonpartisan, and we would work together with anyone to do good, with no one to do ill. And then finally, I want to thank, as you may have saw out in the lobby, the gentleman graciously providing security for us here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. You know, we've strongly been supporters of law enforcement, and we'll always fight back against the senseless notion that we're going to defund the ones that defend us. And having that security here at this event just is a testament to that. So without further ado, let me hand it back to Mandy Drogan.
Welcome again. I'm Mandy Drogan, the campaign manager for Next Generation Texas. And what that means is I'm here to work with each of you. I see a lot of friendly faces that I know and some new ones that I'm excited to meet, and to take all of the amazing policy ideas and work with you and our fantastic team at TPPF and the members up at the legislature to make sure that we are all on the same team in providing the freest, greatest Texas and greatest state in the nation. Thank you. So the real rock stars of today are my friends and colleagues, Brian Phillips and Corey Deangelis. Yes, you can clap for them. They're amazing. Yes. Brian Phillips is our Chief Communication Officer here at TPPF. He has a wealth of experience, particularly in the political world, on communications, including working on presidential, congressional, gubernatorial campaigns. And we're so excited to have him at TPPF because Brian has spearheaded an effort to figure out, how do we communicate effectively with parents and legislators and other officials on what empowering parents mean? So when he comes up, he's going to walk you through extensive research, polling, message testing, so that you see, how did we get to this message? So when we're up there talking to legislators and helping to educate them on how we empower parents, how we ensure that children have the best education possible, Brian is the man behind that plan. So I'm excited to have him come up and share with us. Before he steps up here, I want to introduce a man that I don't know that he needs any introduction with everybody in this room, Dr. Corey Deangelis. You probably see him out all across the country spreading the word on parental empowerment. And even better, he's a local Texan. He's from down in San Antonio. So every time that we need Corey, he is here and committed to all of you to make sure that he can do whatever possible to push that message, to push that narrative. So thank you. Thank you so much, Corey, for being here. At this time, I'm going to have Brian come up and walk through the messaging before we get into Corey and the Q&A. Thank you again.
Check, 1, 2. Everybody hear me? Am I loud? I'll project. I'll use my theater background. So Mandy did a great job of introing, so I don't need to run over that again, exactly what I'm doing here and what I want to convey to you all today. I mean, these events really, they're open to the public, but we assume that we're going to get a lot of interested parties, people who've had experience with the problems with our education system, over the last couple of years. And then a lot of activists are people who want to be activists, or maybe some accidental activists, right? Like some people who kind of forced into this issue because you really care about your kids, you really care about your communities. And so what I wanted to do is kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on the research that we've done over the last couple of years that informed us, that helped us. I don't want to give everybody the keys to the kingdom since this is a public event, and I don't know if there's any union lackeys here. But I will try and pull back a little bit the curtain so you can kind of understand what we know and why it is that we have crafted our messaging and our strategy in the way that we have. And then hopefully we can impart upon you to use this kind of messaging, to use this kind of strategy to effectively communicate our policies, the reasons why we believe what we believe, and the reasons why we support the reforms that will be the number one issue for the next legislature to have success on. So the first thing is, what we learned about this issue, and this stuff is really fascinating. I only have about 20 minutes, but I could do, just on this first part, I could probably do an entire hour on it, is to try and understand what are the animating values that people are using in order to understand and then motivate them on this particular issue, this idea of parent empowerment and kind of what they're feeling. And not in a pejorative way, but really what we're finding is that most people, particularly parents when it comes to their kids, but then just people in general about our future, about society, they do have a deep-seated anxiety about the future. They do have, and sometimes it manifests itself really positively, right? Like that's what gets you up every morning to make sure that you're doing the best thing for your kid, to make sure that they're learning at the right pace. I have a 6-month-old at home now, so I'm really, and this is my first child, so I'm really understanding this for the first time. But what really animates you and kind of understand this anxiety, right, that gets you up and says, is my child learning at the right pace? Do they have everything that they need in order to be successful? And so we're learning a lot about how this animates folks. And as you've noticed, it doesn't take much to get parents, particularly parents, animated about this if they feel like they're being violated in some way, or they're being told things like, when Terry McAuliffe stands up and says, parents have no right to tell teachers what to teach. Right? Like he thinks he's talking about a surface issue, about something that happens in the classroom, about a curriculum plan or something. That's not what we hear. What do we hear? You don't have a right to decide what's best for your kid. That's what we hear. And that's why people get so visceral about this issue. And it's hilarious because all of us in this room, I assume, as soon as we saw Terry McAuliffe say that, we all knew game, set, match, right? We knew immediately because we all get it. We all understand it. We all understand. We all have this anxiety about with the future and about leaving our place better than we found it. And so that's what we're tapping into. Understand that that's the value that we're tapping into. And there is an explosion. There is a reaction in both directions when you effectively tap into that emotion. So how do we do that? And I want to get to the specific messaging. But really, the formula is kind of the way the world works, right? Like the way the world works is, I go out and I gain some kind of information about something, and then I form some sort of opinion about it, and then I decide for myself if that's a good or a bad thing. And then if I have some challenges there, then maybe there's a little community of people that I interact with, and we determine what's the best course of action, and then we solve the problem, right? Like that's just kind of how the world works on everything, right? So a good example of that is let's say I take my car into the mechanic. And I don't just walk in and just hand him my keys and walk out and come get my car in a week and pay him any money, right? Like the first step is like information. I walk in and I tell him, I've got this rattling under my hood. I don't know what it is. And then he does some tests, and then he tells me, well, here's what I think the problem is, right? Like there's that first step, which is like information that we have to have. And the second thing is I get to have an opinion about that information. If he tells me, well, I've heard the rattling under the hood, but what I think you need to do is replace all 4 tires. You think, well, I don't know. I'm not a mechanic, right? Like I'm not the expert, but I'm still allowed to have an opinion on this, right? Like I'm a vested interest in the success of my car, right? And having it work and getting me to work. So I'm allowed to have an opinion on this. And if I don't agree with it, now I could just say, well, hey, you're the mechanic, replace the tires, hopefully fix the noise. But if I don't agree with him, And I think, well, I need some more information on that. And he starts to tell me the information, and maybe it starts to make sense. Oh, the tires are, bald and they're rattling, and that's what's creating this other sound. And it starts to make sense. And I say, okay, great, thanks. Let's fix the tires and let's fix my car. But maybe let's say I don't agree with him, right? I start to inquire a little bit more. What I'm trying to do then, I'm trying to form that community, even just with the one person, right? Which is, tell me more about this. Respect me as the customer in the store. Respect me and my opinions. Have enough respect to me to try and explain the situation to me so that I'm getting the information that I need, so that I understand it, right? And that's generally 99%. Those 3 steps are generally 99% of how the world works. And it doesn't have to be a customer business relationship. It could be, me here at work working with my colleagues. It could be, your wife or your husband. It could be almost any context. I mean, I was thinking about just this stuff on the way to work today, and even just in traffic. I mean, you kind of have this, you get information, you kind of work together to make sure that everybody gets there safely, and you kind of have a little community. And it's that concept, that formula is constantly reinforced to people over and over again, that when the world works, that's the way it works. Now let's go back, and most of you kind of see where I'm going with this. Now let's go back to the context of parent empowerment. You have this deep-seated anxiety that parents have about not knowing, or maybe believing, but not absolutely knowing whether or not they're doing the right thing for their kid. And then you put on top of that a violation of the way that the world works, right? Which is, number one, I don't know what's going on in my school, and the teachers won't tell me. Or let's say they even tell you, and you say, oh my goodness, what's going on in there? Why are those books in my library? Why is that teacher singling out my kid and taking them out of class? What's going on there, right? So you start to form an opinion. Then you go to the teacher, maybe you go to the principal, and you say, hey, what's going on? I need our little community here to figure out what's going on with our kids and why they're not learning. And then they get pushback. And then they go to the school board, and they get their mics turned off. And then up in Round Rock, Jeremy Story gets arrested. Okay, you're violating the way the world works, and you're doing it on an issue that is incredibly sensitive to most people about our future and about our kids. That's what people are experiencing here. That's why this issue has completely exploded and why it has become the issue that it has become. And I will get to the fourth and the most important part of this. Is the fourth step on this is that if at any point along that formula about the way the world works of those 3 steps, how do I say this? There's always at the end of it, there has to be a choice. There has to be agency, right? Like I can always go to a different mechanic, or I can go out on the internet and I can find out some more information about what he told me, and I can go in and I can present that information. There always has to be some kind of leverage in that relationship that forces that formula to work, those first 3 steps, because we both know when I'm talking to the mechanic that I can always go to a different mechanic, or that I can challenge him with some new information or something that gives me some kind of agency, some kind of control that gives me leverage to ensure that that process works. Choice has to be part of this, right? Choice is the leverage that ensures that your child is going to get the education that they deserve. So many people mistake this. Choice is choice, right? Like a lot of people just make this idea that, or have this idea that, choice is just a good in and of itself. And in a lot of cases, that's true. But in this case, it really is the leverage. It's the agency that we have. And without it, that process doesn't work. The world doesn't work. If we're not able to have control over the end decision, if we're not able to have leverage to know that if I'm not getting served the way I need to get served, that I can move on and go find something else, then the process breaks down. And that's where we are right now. That's where I think we are right now with our education system. And I think, and Corey will talk a lot about this as well. That's why we need to have choice. That's the point of choice. Is that it's not, we do this way too much, I think, when we talk about these issues. I think one of the reasons why we haven't been successful for the last 25 years on education is because we've made 2 mistakes. The first is characterizing choice or communicating choice as a way to shame people. And we've been shaming the wrong people for about 20 years, which has generally been suburban parents. You won't allow those poor inner city kids to come to your school because you're a bad person. The reality is the villain is not the suburban parents, because they do have concerns. They have legitimate concerns about, class sizes and, what does that mean if kids are coming to my school? They do have legitimate concerns like anybody else would. So we've been shaming the wrong people for too long and creating or acting as though they're the villains. The other thing we do wrong is that we talk about school choice as though it's macroeconomic theory, right? It's competition, it's pure economics, it's incentives, it's this, that, and that. It's not that for people. As I discussed at the very beginning, this is a very personal issue for people. It's very ingrained. It pokes at an anxiety that we all have. And so we can't talk about it in terms of just as validating our own macroeconomic theories. It has to be discussed in this way that I presented, which is first and foremost, and this is getting to the public policies. This is the third thing I want to mention, is that now our public policies have to resolve. This is the other thing that we always forget as conservatives. Our public policies have to resolve that anxiety that we correctly identified at the beginning, which is, am I able to, do I have the resources, do I have the tools at my disposal to do the thing I need to do, which is choose the best education for my kid? Do I have those resources? So our public policy then has to go back and take each one step by step. Number one, we have to have curriculum transparency. At any point, a parent should be able to, especially with the technology today, a parent should be able to, at any point, be able to determine what is going on in the classroom, what my kids are learning, and so on. Thank you for the break. So that's number one. The second thing is there has to be a process where whether I like what I see or I don't, there has to be a way for me to go in and have an opinion about it and say, I'm not sure that I agree with that book, or I'm not sure that I agree with you conducting social experiments on my kids. Can we talk about this? Can we go in and have a discussion about this? And then the third thing is there has to be some kind of respect, right? Like, yes, no, I'm not a teacher. No, I haven't been an administrator for 20 years like you, but I have an incredibly deeply vested interest in the success of my child, and you need to treat me that way, treat me with respect as somebody who is a major stakeholder in this success, and we need to work together. And if those things all work, I think we can get to a resolution. If that's the way that the process works, I think most schools, most school districts, school board meetings, all of that, I think we can get to a resolution there. But you have to have choice. Without that leverage, without the ability for parents to be able to make a different decision for their kids, you're not going to have that. The other addendum I'll say, and then we'll get Corey up here. The other addendum I'll say is on choice is it has to be a real choice. It has to be an actual, something that you can actually choose. So for example, in the mechanic could always say, if you don't like the way that I'm going to fix your car, you can always go buy a Rolls Royce. Not true, right? Like I can legally go buy a Rolls Royce, right? Like I can do that. I cannot, I'll just tell you right now, I cannot buy a Rolls Royce to fix the rattling in my current Toyota. So it has to be a real choice, because you'll hear the left say that a lot of times. Well, you have choice. Hey, just scrape together $50,000 a year and you can send your kid to whatever school you want to. That's not a real choice for the vast majority of Texans. Here, or the other thing is completely and totally uproot your life, right? Like you move out of the house that you've lived in forever, move away from grandma, move away from your friends and family, change your job. That's your choice. Just move 150 miles away to a different school district. That's not a real choice. So when it comes to choice, it has to, not only does it have to be there and it give us a leverage, but it has to be real and it has to be attainable. So I'm hoping that if we all take this seriously, if we all kind of pursue it this way, I think this is a very different way than we have argued for things like choice, for parent empowerment. And I think that we'll make a tremendous amount of progress in this way because, like, as I said at the beginning, this is kind of how we all solve problems every day, 100 times a day. And I think this will make a lot more sense to people, a lot more sense to the general public, to our activists, and ultimately to the lawmakers who will make the final decision. So thank you very much.
Much for sharing the methodology. of quality schools, transparency, respect for parents, and ultimately choice. And just to piggyback, when this was explained to me as a mom, I don't know if I think we have several parents in the audience here, but I was thinking about it through the lens of when I'm asking my 5-year-old or my 3-year-old to do something, and they just look at me, and then I ask them a little bit louder, and they look at me again, and then I ask them really loud, if I don't have the consequence of timeout or losing swimming or not going to see your friend, they don't listen to me. That's right. Yeah. And that is what this breaks down to, is we as parents, as grandparents, and anyone that's interacted with children in that example, we must have something to come in and say, if this is not done, then this will happen. And we figured out the messaging, and we're excited that you know it now, because that's what choice is. We want fantastic schools. We want the highest quality schools in the country. And we do that through providing parents with power to make the choice. Now, without further ado, I'm ready to introduce the star of the show that I know many people have come to hear, Dr. Corey Deangelis. Shall I read through the bio or
Nope.
Okay, let's just come do your thing. Welcome, Corey Deangelis.
Thank you guys so much. It's good to be at TPPF. Thanks, Mandy, for the kind introduction. I got to correct you real quick, though. You said I'm Dr. Deangelis. I'm not a real doctor. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor. And I have a PhD in education policy, so I could help you with some math problems, but if you have any medical issues in the back, sorry, I won't be able to help. But look, yeah, Brian, great presentation. The messaging is great. I have one message for everybody in here, and that is that it's time for Texas to finally fund students, not systems. You might have seen me promoting the event on social media. All I was pretty much texting was that it's time for Texas to fund students, not systems. And we posted a video earlier with someone from Libre Initiative. Thanks, George. That was great video. I want to do a video with everybody in the audience here. Is that cool? I'm going to say it's time for Texas to fund students. What are you going to say? And if you don't do it loud enough, I'm not posting it. So let's do it. If I can figure out technology. I only know how to use Twitter. I don't know how to do pictures or anything. But here we go. It's time for Texas to fund students, not systems. Students, not systems. It didn't record. I'm going to do, no, it worked. But look, it's really good to be here. Brian had mentioned at the beginning of his presentation that there might have been some union lackeys walking around TPPF. So I don't know if you noticed, but I walked out, not just to get a water, but I was looking for Randy Weingarten because, look, you can't block me in person. You can't hide your comments in person. But no, I didn't find her, but I really wanted to give her an award for being the best school choice advocate of the past 2 years, although inadvertently. The teachers' unions have overplayed their hand and awakened a sleeping giant, parents. Parents have become the new special interest group in town, and they aren't going away anytime soon. And parents aren't going back to sleep. They've woken up, they're pushing back, and they're more powerful than the government school establishment. Why? Because parents care about their kids more than anybody else. And the kids don't belong to the government institutions. Neither do the dollars that are meant for educating them. Education funding is supposed to be meant for educating children, not for propping up and protecting a particular institution, whether that's public or private. The money doesn't belong to the buildings, it belongs to the kids and their families. We should fund students directly and empower families to choose the education providers that best meet their needs and align with their values. Families got to see what the hell was going on in the classroom over the past couple of years. Families who thought their kids were in great public schools, whether it was an A-rated public school according to the state, or whether it was their kids had really good grades on their report card or standardized test scores. But there's a problem there. There's not just one dimension of school quality. Families got to see something else, something that they didn't realize was happening. That the schools that they were trusting their kids to go to were teaching them to hate them. And that is more likely to mobilize parents than anything else. And the only way forward through freedom as opposed to force is to fund the student directly and empower them to choose the schools that best align with their values and best meet their needs. The good news is we have momentum nationally, and we're seeing the biggest push we've ever seen for school choice in Texas history. That's not just coming from me. I don't know if you guys saw the leaked video or soundbite that came from a Governor Abbott campaign event earlier this year where he said that Texas is going to have the biggest push for school choice in the state's history. And he also, at a May event, gave the most forceful endorsement of educational freedom that I have ever heard the governor say in a public event like that. He said that the funding should follow the child, not just to a public school or charter school, but also to a private school of the parents' choosing. That's the way to do it. That's how you truly empower parents. The only way to truly secure parental rights in education is to fund the student directly and empower families to choose. Bottom-up accountability is the strongest form of accountability. Everything else is just regulation. It's time we empower the parents. Look, we've seen a lot of movement nationally. The wind is at our backs. Think about the year of school choice, 2021. 19 states enacted or expanded programs to fund students as opposed to systems. That's a huge victory. We've never seen anything like it in the school choice movement. And again, it's because the teachers' unions did it to themselves. It's kind of their own fault. And now parents are pushing back. And the wins didn't stop in 2021. In 2022, anybody hear about what just happened in Arizona? Pretty good, pretty good. Actually, it's great. It's the gold standard for educational freedom. Just earlier this month, Arizona just signed into law the most expansive education savings account program in the nation, which is the gold standard of school choice policy. It is the purest form of funding students as opposed to systems. Now, every single family in Arizona, regardless of income, will be able to take their children's education dollars to the education providers of their choosing, whether that's a public school, private school, charter school, or a home-based education option. This is the most flexible, customizable version of educational freedom. We just had a win at the Supreme Court. Anybody hear about that? It makes it pretty dang clear, and it has been for decades already, that school choice isn't a problem with the so-called separation of church and state. That line isn't even in the US Constitution, by the way. But what people are talking about when they say, oh, well, this is public money going to religious private schools. First of all, there's no such thing as public money. It's taxpayer dollars. But then, too, the same people repeating this stupid line over and over again, they support public money or taxpayer money going to private everything else. You have Medicaid dollars that can be used at private religious hospitals. You have Pell Grants for higher education, public money that could be used at private or public, religious or non-religious universities. We have the federal Head Start program, other state-funded pre-K programs that can be used at private, religious or non-religious pre-K providers. That's all fine and dandy, but when it comes to those in-between years of K through 12 education, they freak out. Why would that be? Because it's not about logic, it's all about power. And the only way that you can bridge that apparent logical inconsistency is to understand that we have choice in everything else in the United States. We have choice with higher education, pre-K, and every other industry. Think about it. Public money for food stamps. You can use it at private, not hospitals. That would be weird. But grocery stores. Look, and no one says that allowing families to choose their grocery store steals money from H-E-B. No one would ever say that. Why? Because we all understand that the money doesn't belong to any of the dang grocery stores. It belongs to the families and the taxpayers. And the primary beneficiaries of these initiatives are the families and their children. Same thing with K through 12 education funding. The money doesn't belong to the government schools. It never has. They want you to believe that, and they want you to believe that your kids belong to their institutions. If you still like your public school, you can keep your public school. But what people are talking about when they say, this is public money going to private religious institutions, they're talking about the Establishment Clause of the US Constitution, obviously. They think it's the government establishing a religion, which doesn't make any sense at all when it comes to K-12 education. But in 2002, Zelman v. Simmons-Harris at the Supreme Court ruled and made it pretty clear that an Ohio voucher program did not violate the Establishment Clause. Why? For the same reason that all these other initiatives don't violate the Establishment Clause, and that is because the money goes to individual families, and then they have a choice in the matter. They can take it to the religious or non-religious institution of their choosing. Because the families are the primary beneficiaries, there is no violation of the Establishment Clause. We had a Supreme Court victory in 2020, Espinoza v. Montana, and earlier last month in 2022, the Carson v. Macon case. So it is clear that school choice is permissible under the Constitution, and that should embolden lawmakers and legislators and the public to push even harder than we already are. There's no issue. There's a lot more good news to come. I hope I'm not running out of time yet. But look, we had the year of school choice, Arizona leading the way. I think Texas can follow, other states. I mean, Doug Ducey pretty much walked over to Governor Ron DeSantis and said, I'm going to take that school choice championship belt out of your hands. Hopefully, DeSantis comes back and snags it back. Look, this is the kind of competition, friendly competition, that I can get behind. Because at the end of the day, it's politically beneficial, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do. The money doesn't belong to the schools, it belongs to the families. It's that simple. That's the message. And we've also seen that it could be a form of political suicide to come out against parental rights in education. Parents are watching. Yeah, I should mention Virginia. Brian mentioned it earlier. Who in the world, after the past couple of years, is going to come up on the final debate stage and say, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. Yeah, bad idea. And then didn't backpedal from that. Instead, leaned in harder to that anti-parent rhetoric. Even had the person I called out earlier, Randy Weingarten, who gets the School Choice Championship Award of the Year, on the stage stumping for him the night before the election. Who does that? That is a bad move. But Youngkin played it smart. He's understood that coming out against parental rights is a political disaster. And we've seen the same thing unfold. And by the way, in Virginia, the number 2 issue, according to Washington Post exit polling, was education. That election was won on the issue of education. We've had another poll from Randy Weingarten's own union just come out, finding that Republicans are up on the issue of education. What an epic self-own for the teachers union. Here you go, Randy Weingarten. Here's your massive L. You're losing. You're losing over and over again, but you can't help yourself because you keep stepping in it and coming out against parental rights. No more. Parents are not going to sit back and feel powerless like they did in 2020 ever again. Another poll came out. Democrats for education reform. Anybody see that one? Republicans up again in the same month, 2 polls now, on the issue of education by 3 points. You might say, well, that's not enough. It should be 50 points up. But the thing is, historically speaking, Republicans have been down on the issue of education in the double digits. A Gallup poll in 2017, for example, found Republicans down on education at the time by 19 percentage points. So that's a seismic shift in support. And if politicians are smart from all parties, they would lean into parental rights and stop telling families that they must send their kids to residentially assigned government-run schools. Zip code shouldn't determine your future, it shouldn't determine your education, and your money doesn't belong to the schools. It should follow the child. And we've seen more victories as well. We saw this in primaries recently, but we also saw this in polling. Nationwide, the latest Real Clear Opinion Research poll has found an 8 percentage point jump in support of school choice nationwide among likely American voters, from to about 72% of Americans supporting it, up 8 percentage points from April of 2020. That's a seismic shift in support there as well. It's a sea change. Last time there was a big fight in Texas for a school choice initiative, it didn't make it all the way, and it kind of went by silently. That's not going to happen this time. Texans are watching. Parents are watching. But more importantly, the entire nation is watching what's happening in Texas right now. And if school choice does not succeed, it'll be a national disaster, and everybody will be talking about it. But I don't think that's going to be the case. Politicians listen to parents. They listen to what's popular. The polling's popular. Look at the Republican primary results in March of 2022. They had a school choice ballot proposition. I think it was Prop 9. 88% of Texas Republican primary voters supporting school choice. That's huge. Last time that I saw the poll happen on the ballot was about 2018, where about 79% of Texas Republican primary voters supporting school choice. That's a 9 percentage point jump in support of school choice among Texas Republican primary voters. But we also have polling from Morning Consult at the state level of Texas, finding 77% of school parents supporting the funding following the child as opposed to the institution. This is a no-brainer. The other side has one argument against it. They repeat it over and over again. They say that this will defund the public schools. Anybody hear that? Some people are saying, whoa, 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 whoa. But the reality is the money doesn't belong to the schools in the first place. No one would say allowing you to choose your grocery store defunds HEB. And oh, by the way, why would giving families a choice defund those institutions? That's where I usually get blocked on social media because there's no good answer to that. They'll say, well, because people want to go somewhere else. Yeah, that's a good argument for school choice. Or they'll say, oh, those parents that want to do that, they're just vultures. Anybody see that happen? Yeah, I can't, why would you do that? I mean, Terry McAuliffe just had a massive L in Virginia. He said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. And we had someone, maybe in the state of Texas, say, oh, well, hold my beer. Parents are vultures. No, absolutely not. That's not going to fly with parents. And the only way forward through freedom, again, as opposed to force, is to fund students, not systems. And look, at the end of the day, mathematically, if a parent chooses a private school using an education savings account program, for example, it only happens to be about half of the total funding amount. In Texas, public schools spend about $13,000 per kid. According to Census Bureau from 2019, it's probably a lot higher now with all of the supposed COVID relief dollars. Nationwide, that was on average about $3,000 or $4,000 per student. The schools have plenty of money. They don't know how to spend it, they have so much money. I mean, I heard some stories in Texas where they were spending on football fields and stadium because COVID relief, right? Other states are spending on diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. This was never about science. It was always about politics and power dynamics. And look, if you're taking about half of the funding to the school of your choosing, public schools get to keep thousands of dollars for students they're no longer educating. Mathematically, the per pupil funding amount and expenditure amount ends up to be higher in the public schools. And oh, by the way, we have tons of evidence suggesting competition works in education just like it does in every other sector. The people who are making this argument that this is bad for the public schools, they don't have very much confidence in the public schools. I do. I think there's a lot of great public schools in Texas and in other places. And look, the ones that are doing a good job, they'll have plenty of money. They'll up their game in response to competition. And that's what we see play out over and over and over again. These doomsday scenarios that we hear from the other side just haven't played out in practice. And we've seen 25 of 28 studies on the topic finding statistically significant positive effects of private school choice competition on the outcomes in the public schools. So school choice is a rising tide that lifts all boats. And by the way, you might hear someone say that, oh, well, this is going to lead to inequities in the public school system. This is going to lead to problems. But look, the reality is the most advantaged families already have school choice in some one way or the other. They're already at least more likely to be able to afford to live in a neighborhood that's assigned to the best quote-unquote public schools. They're more likely to be able to afford at least to be able to pay for private school tuition and fees out of pocket. So school choice is an equalizer. It allows more families to access educational opportunities. This shouldn't be a partisan issue until you start to think about the political power dynamics when it comes to the unions. But the reality is we have a new union. It's about time the kids have a union and the parents are the ones sticking up for them. I have no idea how much time, but look, if I'm not coming up against time, we'll have more time for questions. 15, so we're going to do more time for Q&A. In about 5, what if I ran out of all of the talking points? No, I'm not done yet. But look, the political winds have shifted. Parents are pushing back. And everybody should get behind the parents, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent. The latest Real Clear Opinion research polling nationwide found supermajority support among Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. This is a political winner. It's the winner for the kids. And look, I'm on the side of the parents. Let them choose. And at the same time, you don't want to mess with the mama bears. That's right. We have some mama bears in the room. Mama bears. Look, if you wait. Papa bears in the room. All types of bears. I don't want to, There's all types of bears in the room. But look, the reality is they fight for their kids harder than anyone will ever fight to take that right to educate their kids as they see fit ever. And so politicians from all parties would be wise to side with parents going forward. Again, a lot of people said, oh, the Virginia thing was just a blip. The schools were closed for so long in Virginia, and this just happened, and then there was the election. The polls are showing that it wasn't just a blip. And parents know it. When that poll came out from Randy Weingarten's union, people were like, that didn't surprise any of the parents in this room. Why? Because they'll never forget what happened to their kids when they were trapped in a system for 2 years where they feel like their kids are being indoctrinated. And you might say there's other ways to fix the issues of indoctrination in the classroom, in the public school system. There are tweaks you can make to the system, but the problem is with the system itself. We've seen a lot of problems bubble up over the past couple of years, whether that was remote versus in-person learning. We couldn't even call it remote learning. It was remotely learning because kids were hurt so bad over the past couple of years. Look, it wasn't as bad in Texas because the unions aren't as powerful here as they are in places like Chicago. But in Chicago, and going into 2022, they were fighting to keep the schools closed. 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation of children. They held children's education hostage to secure multiple multi-billion-dollar ransom payments from the federal government. And no one's going to forget that. You had tweets from the teachers union saying that, oh, well, if you want to reopen schools, you must be racist, misogynist, and sexist if you want to reopen the schools. That tweet was deleted after I replied to them from the Chicago Teachers Union. You had board members vacationing in Puerto Rico in person while railing against going back to work in person. It was right in front of everybody's eyes, but at the same time, there were disagreements among families too about remote versus in person. There were disagreements about whether you want a mask mandate or to allow the families to choose whether to do that to their kids or not, whether you wanted this curriculum or that curriculum. All of these problems are just symptoms of the larger issue, which is that we force millions of families to send their kids to residentially assigned government-run schools that are by definition a one-size-fits-all disaster that's not going to work for families who disagree about how they want their kids raised. That problem is always going to be here. And so if we put sunlight on the entire system, there's always going to be a push for change. You can tweak things in the system, but the best solution from the bottom up is to empower families to choose. And we're in Texas right now, and I've seen huge support, more support than we've ever seen before. We have the governor leading on the issue, and we have a lot of legislators who are fierce advocates for educational freedom. I think we have, some of them might be in the room that are new legislators. So thank you for supporting parental rights and education. But more importantly, thank you to the parents in the room for being the leading charge on the seismic shift for educational freedom. It's time for Texas. It is time for Texas to free families from the clutches of the power-hungry teachers union and the government school establishment once and for all. I still got time, but I'm going to give you guys some more time for questions. Look, it's time for families to be freed from the system. It's time for Texas to fund students, not institutions. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, I'm so excited. Oftentimes we have to start. Well, thank you, Corey. This was wonderful. And I know that we're excited about answering more questions about school choice and how we can ultimately empower parents. So I'll just start by, we've got a microphone that's coming right here.
Not sure if you're familiar with recapture or if any of the other states that have expanded or instituted school choice have that, but how do they factor in that issue?
What do you mean by recapture?
So as spending per pupil increases over a certain cap, that money is then sent back to the state to be redistributed to lower income districts.
Funding formula?
Robin Hood, yeah.
Through property taxes. So what you're asking about is the tax-rich public school systems having to pay in. So the best way to get around that is to empower parents and allow funding to follow the child. Ultimately, we all agree as a state and as a nation that an educated population is a good thing, right? We can't be controlled. We don't lose our freedoms. So to try and go into the funding formula, which I'm pretty sure I've met about 10 people that really truly understand the details of how it works, but on a broad sense of we take money similar to the Robin Hood, we take money from rich people and we have to distribute it into the poorer districts that don't have the tax base. So when we support parents, when we support students, we know that students across Texas are funded at roughly $14,000 per student. The average private school tuition, just so we all are clear on the numbers, is $8,000. So while I'm not gonna say there's no changing, but that is a tax issue, that is a different messaging issue that has to be addressed. Ultimately, when we empower parents through choice who are unhappy, whether they're in a high-performing school district where sometimes their student just isn't thriving, or if they're in a low-performing, or they're in a woke school district that's teaching your kids against your values. If we empower parents with the choice, meaning they go in and they're not happy with the education and their school system is not responsive, then they should allow the funding to follow the student. So to address the Robin Hood or the recapture scenario, that would do that, because if we allow a portion of the funding to follow the child based on our state average of $14,000 and we let the portion go, those families have the choice and it funds all of our students, and some of them won't need the full amount, because if you're taking a portion, which if we just take the state portion of it, which is roughly 9,500, 10,000-ish, if we're only having to go into and say spend $6,000 or $8,000 or whatever it is, that enables more money to be left behind in the school system.
Right, which increases the spending per pupil, which increases recapture, right? So that's where my question comes in, because some of the messaging is when you institute school choice, the spending per pupil at public schools increases. And that's something that.
But that's not more money coming out of the taxpayer's pocket.
Well,
It's the same money. It's the same money that's already in the system.
I understand. Yeah, so it's the same money, but it's still left. It's going back to the public school. And if it's in the district and it's a tax-rich district, if they've got more money per student, recapture.
Lower tax.
Do you mind if I just add?
Right. Hey, great point. Lower. I mean, that would be it. We would. Yes, absolutely. In theory, we should be lowering taxes. Michael, would you?
So on school finance, so the amount that would be left for the family for facilities funding, so that, let's see. So Mandy talked about 10,000 going with the child. That other 4 is for facilities. There is no recapture on that 4. Okay. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say that is a tactic of the left, by the way. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what you did, but getting into the minutia and getting into the numbers is how they kill this every single time. Yeah. So that is, we talk about, I was just telling one of my bosses, some messages are for the jury and some are for the judge. That's a message for the judge, and they will figure that out there. You have to demand as the jury that what comes out of there is parent empowerment.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Clark, and I filed the first federal lawsuit against woke indoctrination in America.
Woo! Welcome.
So my main concern is that I want to make sure that my child is not being groomed or indoctrinated at school, because I've been fighting this for the last 2 years, and I am now, look at me, I'm a mess. I'm tired.
Great, come on.
Right. So what I want to know is how are we going to be able to keep the federal government from dictating what we do in the schools that we choose from now on? Because I feel like that is one of the things that is going to prevent people from being able to wrap their head around public money going to private schools. And how are we going to be able to choose different types of education programs that are not schools? Because I got news for you, private schools are captured too.
Yeah.
So I want my daughter to be able to go to school without being told she's a boy, right? And so in order to do that, I want to be able to pick a pod or a micro school or something like that that is not part of what we consider traditional education, because I think we need to just start, thinking about other forms of education models, because this whole thing is a mess.
Can I take you on the state on our parent empowerment tour? Can I just take you with us on our parent empowerment
come
tour
with us
that
on
we've
the
done
tour
around
later.
the state? Because you are the mama bear we want. But Corey, I'll let you step in.
Yeah, so great argument for education savings accounts. This is what was put forward in 2017 in Texas as well. The funding that would have followed you to the government-run school, you could still take it there. Again, if you like your public school, you can keep your public school. But if not, that funding would follow the child to an education savings account, which you could then use for private school tuition and fees, but you don't have to use it at a private school. You could also use it as a micro school for tutoring, for textbooks, for home schooling curriculum. And so that this allows the families to have maximum choice. On the issue of federal involvement, this would be a state-funded program, not a federally funded program, so that gets rid of that concern. But you still might say, well, what about state regulations? Well, that's why we should read the bill and make sure that there aren't onerous regulations. Some programs do have those, but parents can read the bill, propose amendments if there is onerous regulations. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't make perfect the enemy of the good. We can't be missing the forest for the trees, because in the current system, 9 out of 10 kids are in government-operated, government-controlled, government-funded schools already. So we might as well take the incremental victory and allow families to have the choice to accept the money or not, and allow the private schools to have the choice to opt into the program to accept the funding or not. This isn't utopia, but it's a step in the right direction by giving the families that choice. If families were forced to take the money, and any regulations that might come along with that, I'd be against such a program. But I've seen no school choice program, there's over 60 in the United States, that force any schools or any private individuals, families, to accept the funding. As the great economist Thomas Sowell once said, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. So some people making the argument that, well, this thing might happen in the future in 20 years if we take the money now. I know there's no regulations now, but it might happen. I call this a fear-mongering argument. And by the way, look, this is a misunderstanding of trade-offs. Every policy change has costs and benefits, and so does the status quo. So opposing parental rights and education and school choice right now because a possible future risk is having, one, Randy Weingarten cheering from the sidelines saying, oh yeah, I'm getting to keep my monopoly going forward. She's actually repeated this fear-mongering argument because she knows the result of it will be worse than if we had school choice. It'll cement her monopoly where kids are already being indoctrinated. Oh, by the way, there's another doomsday scenario where you have 90% of kids going to government-run schools that could be promoting socialist ideologies, and they could come and regulate homeschooling and private education later without school choice, which wouldn't be a good thing. They're not clapping because they want socialist indoctrination later. They're clapping because it's the reality of trade-offs and costs and benefits. Families get a choice. It's all voluntary. And look, the potential future risk of regulations that could happen without school choice, by the way, is outweighed by the guaranteed costs of cementing the status quo government-run school monopoly, where those kids can grow up later on in life and come after your home and private education regardless. Let's take the W when we can and look, the other benefit of taking the W is well, one, we get to win and families have a choice, but then two, you have a broader coalition defending against those future calls for regulation, right. And you make home and private education more mainstream. If more people are using private education, they'll be more likely to, or less likely to call for regulations in the future because it won't be this boogeyman thing. And that was another benefit, silver lining of the pandemic. Families got a taste of home-based education, and when that happened, there was polling each and every month of families saying that they're, and the rest of society saying that they're more favorable to the concept of homeschooling than they ever had been before the pandemic. That's going to lead you to be less likely to regulate homeschooling in the future. And oh, by the way, the bills can be written in smart ways. In Arizona, for example, they separate out homeschoolers from ESA students. If you take the money, even if it looks like what you're doing is homeschooling, in the law, you will be separated to prevent any future however unlikely regulatory spillovers from pure homeschoolers that don't accept the money to non-homeschoolers. Even if it looks like they're homeschooling, they're going to be ESA students. So I think some homeschooling organizations have really liked that separation in the law. And hey, I don't know what the bill, if there is one coming in Texas, will look like, but that would be a good amendment or something to put into it. So
thank
look,
you.
let's take the W and not be on the side of the teachers unions.
Yes, and to answer the question, so that's what I love about TBPF, is being surrounded by the most brilliant policy minds in the state of Texas and quite frankly in the country. Michael Barba, who was able to step up here, he is our policy expert. He was able to answer the recapture question. He is phenomenal at all of the in-depth details, as well as working with our allies, with private school associations, homeschoolers, the Catholic schools, to make sure that the questions that are coming up that we can see have been problems across 31 states plus the District of Columbia, that if there's one benefit of not being leaders on this, it's that we can see where the mistakes have made. And to answer the question about funding and how do we keep the strings attached, yes, there is legislation being written. We're working with our experts. We're working with legislators that are on board, that see that parents are empowered, and we are using every single legal tactic and from what we've seen across the states to craft it in a way where it cannot be penetrated, where there is no federal dollars that could come in like a free in school and reduced lunch and say, now you have to do that. We've been working with the Catholics on that, who have now had to say we can't participate. So we have listened to all of the activists, all of the leaders, all of everyone that is saying, here are the pros, here are the cons, how do we account for that? And the bills that we are crafting right now with the help of members that are ready to lead on this, they see that and they're answering those concerns as well. And so no federal dollars and no strings attached. She's got it first.
Is this on? Okay. Hi. First of all, thank you to Texas Policy, Public Policy Foundation for having me here. I really appreciate it and enjoy listening to your perspectives. One concern I have is a huge concern, and that is how divided our country is. And I feel like people already have migrated to their news and their opinions, and they are seeking echo chambers that simply reflect back what they already believe. Mm-hmm. I am a teacher, and I work very hard to keep my personal opinions, my ideology. My students don't know my political perspective because I believe very firmly, and I work with many teachers that also feel the same way, just so you know. But I feel very strongly that students need to be taught how to think, not what to think. And my worry is by giving parents choice over what is taught to their children is that we will continue this divide into our echo chambers, where that, you know, you've got the people who don't believe Trump's election was stolen. You've got the ones who do believe it. We can't, this parent doesn't want us to teach that part of history. They only want us to teach this part of history because it doesn't agree with their biases and their opinions. My question is, how do you ensure, because we have TEKS that we have to follow, yes. How do you ensure that parents are truly wanting factual information taught in school as opposed to their personal ideologies and biases.
So thank you for your service as a teacher. Thank you. We love wonderful teachers, and we want to lift up amazing teachers. So I just want to say that we're so grateful to wonderful teachers that realize that education. The second point, and I'm saying this from a personal standpoint, I am a mother. As I know there are parents all throughout this, there is no one that loves my children like I do. No one. My relationship with the school and the teacher is under the assumption that, one, I'm in control. Let's be clear. Me, Mama Bear, like she disappeared, but and like so many of you, that's my job. That's what I'm here to do. I am here to work with the teachers. And number two, recognizing that there are so many teachers like you out there. And I'm going to give a perfect example. In fact, I met Brenda in the bathroom who shared with me, sorry, I hope I'm not, but she shared with me that she was one of the leaders that reached out to Corey about corruption and illegal activity that was going on in an ISD. We created, and this was on Mother's Day, and I say this because it was my gift for Mother's Day. We created the corruption tip line, corruptiontipline.com, because there are teachers all throughout Texas that feel like you. They are not heard. They want to be teaching character building skills, none of the nonsense that they see. And so, unfortunately, the opposition has tried to create a divide, as you noted, between parents and teachers. But we all know that that's the team that educates children. So to your point, we can't legislate good behavior. We can't legislate good parenting. But what we can do is ensure that there is transparency in the curriculum and respect for parents who love their children and their ultimate authority. And with that, we will grow and be able to snuff out the nonsense that we see in the schools. When we give parents the option to say, I am not sending my kid to that class, the parent gets to make that choice, and they ultimately can say, this is not meeting my needs, and I am going to choose something else. The school system will respond, and we've seen it time and time again. And the example is the District of Columbia that has had the scholarship, the Opportunity Scholarship for 18 years now, you would be an exit, something like that. Okay, they realized their parents' low-income minority kids, they had one of the worst school districts in the nation. The teacher, when they got the Opportunity Scholarship, the teachers and the unions went, holy cow, these poor parents actually want their kids to get an education, because who loves their kids more than anybody and any parent? No one. And they started door knocking throughout DC to say, here's what we have done to change. We heard you, parent. We heard you, mom, with a third grade education, and we are here to answer the calls. So ultimately, in any free market system, when you provide choice, it creates competition, and parents who control the education and children are the winners.
Just two things. Look, a lot of people will say school choice. If you're for that, you must be against teachers. Well, one, there are teachers in private and charter schools.
That's right.
But then two, more importantly, the traditional system doesn't meet the needs of individual teachers either. In Texas, for example, since 1970, we've increased per pupil education expenditures in the government-run schools by about 167%. After adjusting for inflation, teacher salaries actually only increased by about 11% over that same period in real terms. The money's there. It's not going to the classroom towards the teachers. And in fact, 5 studies that I've written about at a blog called School Choice Benefits Teachers Too at the Washington Examiner have found statistically significant positive effects of private and charter school competition on teacher salaries in the public schools. So competition in the market for goods and services is great for families and students, obviously, but competition in the labor market is also good for teachers. The school districts start to have stronger incentives to put the money into the classroom as opposed towards the administrators and staffing surges. And then
That's right.
2, there's no such thing as a values neutral school. That is a myth of the public school system. Someone's values are going to get into the school system. It tends to be on one way as opposed to the other. And the real question is, who gets to determine what kind of values are imparted on your children? It's not the village, it's the parents. These are the parents' kids. So I think that's the more important question. And in fact, look, yes, we are in a polarized society today, but we also have 9 out of 10 kids in public schools today. Maybe there's a correlation there. And in fact, there's been a couple of systematic reviews on the topic, one by Patrick Wolf at the University of Arkansas in an article from 2007 actually called Civics Exam at Education Next, finding that the vast majority of the studies either found that private school choice led to the same or better outcomes when it came to things like civic engagement, political tolerance of others. Maybe when you learn how to logically debate other people, you're more likely to tolerate other people's views. So better education could lead to more cohesiveness as a society as well, and that's what the evidence bears out in that review. And then I did one at the Journal of School Choice in 2017 called something like, "Do self-interested schooling selections improve society?" The answer is yes. And there's overwhelmingly either null to positive effects on the outcome of civic engagement, political tolerance, and political participation. So this is a win-win situation. It's not families versus teachers. It's both, because the current system isn't meeting either of their needs very well. And in the places where it is, they're not going to see a lot of change, right? Because if you have great public schools, why leave? It can be a large transaction cost in doing so. So look, this doesn't have to be a battle. Some people want to turn it into one. If you want to usurp parental rights, it's going to be a battle. And I'm thankful for the parents here.
That's right. Great question.
Okay, real quick. My name is Jamie Marroquin, and last year I was carried out of a school board meeting for not wearing a mask. And I was then given a criminal trespass warning, which meant I was not allowed to attend any of my children's athletic events or even go to their school. Police officers would escort me out each time I tried to do that. So I want my children to be able to go right now from Northside Independent School District to Northeast, and we are right on that border. Like the Northeast school is half a mile away, while their middle school is 6 miles away. I called and I asked, how can I get my twins into the Northeast? And they basically shut me down and said I couldn't. Is there a way to, right now, to help me do that or figure out a way to usurp what is the law right now?
Good question. Mama, I'm so sorry that you had that experience. And that goes to the point that we were talking about earlier. I know you didn't get there getting drug out because you were not trying to engage and protect your kids. So I'm sorry for that. But I also want to bring, well, she's got a microphone. Emily Sass, one of our policy experts, can answer. We have a paper coming out on your exact question because you should have that choice. Emily.
Hi. Love to talk with you more about this later. Essentially, sometimes children are able to cross school district borders, but really districts are in control of that process. They decide how many kids they have capacity to accept, and many districts just say, even if they have available seats, sorry, we don't take other kids from other areas, even though those kids will bring state full formula funding into that district. They're more interested in keeping and maintaining the borders that they have. So there should be more flexibility and more transparency for families interested in moving from one district to another. We're not talking about even opting out of the government school system. We're just talking about switching schools or districts within that system. And there are ways to make that process more transparent, more available to parents. One simple one would just be to require districts to post available capacity. We're not talking about building new buildings, creating seats that don't exist, but say every quarter saying, these are the seats that we have with the staff that we have currently. We can fit this many more kids. And then to provide students a reason if they apply for one of those seats and are denied. There are also some great fixes we could make for districts that in some cases are charging tuition to students who are coming into the district. But I would start with those transparency measures, just saying, listen, just tell us how many seats you have. And if you're not going to let families in, give them a reason why.
Thank you, Emily. So I want to keep this conversation going because this is amazing and I see so many questions. Corey and I do have to exit here to go to another meeting, but I want to bring up one of the most compelling speakers to talk to you all more, as well as our policy analysts. Come on, I know I'm putting you on the spot. I know, I'm sorry, but we're here. We've got great questions. So we're going to exit. By the way, I also want to say, in my previous life, previous job, before I came to TPPF to lead as the campaign manager, I worked with my colleagues, Michael Benjamin over there at AFC. He's a wealth of knowledge. I want to let him ask his question in a moment, and Corey. And over at AFC, let me put on my C4 hat right now. We would love to talk to engaged citizens, parents, grandparents, people that recognize there's a vision, there's a problem. We need to do something. And after we would talk about it, share the information, when we would go with the C4 groups and go to a Capitol and share what we know. So I'm just letting you know that in the C4 capacity, when you're working with groups, American Federation for Children has a C4, Liberty for the Kids has a C4 here, Heritage Action has a C4, I mean, AFP has a C4, Libre has a C4. This room is full of experts that want to help you. And they want to, because we're not the best messengers, right? 90% of the message is the messenger. We're not the messengers. You all are the messengers. And we all can't do what we do without you. So thank you for being here. Corey will be testifying at the Capitol later today, in case anyone didn't know that, on parent empowerment. Yes. So I'm going to let Richard continue to guide the conversation. Again, we have policy experts up here to answer questions, and I hope I see y'all later on today.
All right, let's give them a big round of applause. Mandy, Brian, and Corey, you guys are just the best.